have a few Pearl and Dean adverts, shouldn't we? Music that's too loud. We on? Okay, so hopefully you can see. Could do without my face at the top if that's possible. Is that get rid of it? It's not on my screen. Never mind. Monty, would you just pray for us? That's what we do. Please. So the idea is carry it on from Canterbury Street there. Once a month we have a presentation. It's Andy Vince coming down so I can do the presentation, or if we haven't got a visitor, then Monty or Dan will do the talk and I'll do the presentation, or someone else can do the presentation. So I went for this one. Anna likes subtitles. She cheers inside of her little soul when the subtitles come on, don't you? And I watched the documentary, I think only about a week or two ago, a Dan Snow documentary on Dunkirk, which is very good, really, and it kind of stirred the memories of when I looked into the story. So it was May 19th. I'll give you a little bit of the background as we go along. It's May 1940 when the British Army was evacuated from the beach at Dunkirk and the port of Dunkirk. Over 9 days, 338,226 men came home. And I'll probably say this more than once in the meeting, but to know the exact number is a very Israelite thing. You know, God knows how many hairs there are on your head. And the idea is not so important how many hairs are on your head, but God cares for everyone. I remember once, I think it was it doesn't matter where it was, someone was baptized, and they put a little note on in the pastors group, and somebody made it very clear that everyone counts. Every single one counts. The Lord rejoices in the presence of the angels when one sinner repents. You know, so it's a very Israelite thing for everyone to count. So just a little preamble: a time to love and a time to hate, a time of war and a time of peace. So war. I was saying to someone earlier on that my dad used to have a saying that trade unions were a necessary evil. That was his saying. I thought, well, he said it. So that's an interesting saying. And you could say the same about war. God describes himself as the God of war, the Lord of hosts. That's what it means, the God of armies. There is actually law. There is war law. So in wars, there are laws, often broken. But there are laws. And all laws that are proper laws come from God. They all come from God. Men interpret them, hopefully, in a reasonable way. But the Bible says there's a time of war. I like this one from Rudyard Kipling. In times of war and not before, God and the soldier we adore. But in times of peace and all things righted, God is forgotten and the soldier slighted. When I did this last time, I went through an awful lot why Britain has a particular place in God's plan, and it definitely does. But I've cut most of that out. I've cut quite a few things out. He lay down as a lioness is Jacob, and as a great lion, who shall stir him up? Blessed is he that blesses thee, and cursed is he that curses thee. Well, he was stirred up. He was stirred up in there. I was saying a couple of weeks ago, I said, I was repeating something I'd heard, that in World War II, Britain was the only country that went to war for its friends before it was attacked. The only one. And then when I got home, I thought, oh no, France and Britain declared war in September 1939 on Germany because they'd invaded Poland. But nobody went to war until May in 1940. There was actually no fighting. More or less, it was called the phony war. So although France declared war and Britain declared war, nobody was fighting anyone. From September 1939 till May 1940, when it kicked off. And so just the timeline of May in 9, it's a mad month. If you watch the film The Darkest Hour, it's about the month of May in 1940. That's based on a book. I think it's 12 Days in May. The timeline of this is really very short. So much happened, nearly all of it bad. So we'll read. So nothing has happened on the 9th of May. The Germans invaded Belgium on the 9th of May. The 10th of May they invaded Holland. And on the 10th of May they invaded France. On the 10th of May, Winston Churchill became the Prime Minister. In very difficult circumstances. As I say, nothing has happened until those days, and then everything happened. So the Germans, they attacked on the top part. I'll tell you a little bit more about Holland in a minute. Holland and Belgium. So Holland and Belgium were neutral. They hadn't declared war, and the Germans invaded them. France had, but nothing had happened. But it was believed that France was impenetrable because they had this thing along the bottom called the Maginot Line, which is a fortification that no tank could drive over. And any army would have a very big, very difficult job getting past those defences. So it was thought that France was impenetrable. The only thing that they didn't defend was a forest called the Ardennes Forest. That's where they went. They just didn't believe you could drive a tank through it, and they drove thousands through it. So the 9th and 10th of May, they invade. It's called Blitzkrieg. It's lightning war. And if you think of the First World War, 6 months you'd make 100 yards this way or that way. These took half the continent in 2 weeks. Nothing's ever been seen like it before. And so this is what's happening on the I think it's the 14th of May. The Germans firebombed Rotterdam. So I'll show you, that's Rotterdam after the bombing, that's Rotterdam before the bombing, that's Rotterdam after the bombing. And he firebombed it. If you walk in Rotterdam now, you walk, because you have to park your car miles away from the hall, don't you? And well, especially if you don't want to pay the parking fees. So all park miles away, because none of them want to pay the parking fees. And you walk past these little red lights in the ground. And it's the circle of where the fire went to. When they took the heart out of the city. And also in Rotterdam now, there's no gas. If you want hot water, well, everyone has hot water in the house, and it's piped into your house hot. So they never have that again. And they said to the Dutch, if you don't surrender, tomorrow we'll do Utrecht, the next day we'll do this city, and the next day we'll do that one. And the Dutch said, courage isn't enough this time. We have to surrender. So Holland surrendered on, I can't remember, within a week of the 14th. It might have been on the same day. So Holland surrendered. That's a statue in Rotterdam to commemorate their heart being burnt out. You know, this is frightening stuff going on. As I say, Churchill, this is his first radio broadcast 9 days after he's been made Prime Minister. Nothing's happening when he was made. 9 days later, Europe's just burning. And he says, arm yourselves and be ye men of valour, and be in readiness for the conflict, for it's better for us to perish in battle and to look upon the outrage of our nation and our altar. As the will of God is in heaven, even so let it be. And that's actually a quote. It's not his words. It's from in the Bible's got a thing. Well, not the Bible. Jerry knows the Apocrypha, and it includes the books of Maccabees, which may well be historical but not inspired. It's a quote from there. It's a quote from what wasn't the Bible. He did mention God plenty enough. Winston Churchill. So the 23rd of May. So as I say, those countries that invaded on the 9th and the 10th, Churchill's Prime Minister now for less than 2 weeks. And on the 23rd of May, things are going so badly. So the British had sent their army to Europe, to France, the British Expeditionary Force for the north, really. And when they invaded Belgium and Holland, they went up north. But that wasn't, Hitler's plan was to come south. And that was kind of a distraction. That was a decoy, which worked. So the British Army have gone north. Holland has fallen. Belgium's about to fall, and they've come behind them in France, and they are trapped. They are trapped in a machine that's only winning, and the British and the French are only losing. There was no victories. Churchill in the early days, if you watch the film The Darkest Hour, I think he did give a speech that said that he'd won some battles. And the king said to him in the film, he said, I've called you to lead my people, not mislead them, because there had not been. And he never did that again. He never did that again, exaggerated something untruly to make it sound better than it was. He never did that again. I've listened to every word of his speeches, and they're good. So on the 23rd, things are dire and grim. So the king, this is King George, the whatever it was, the 5th, is it? 6th? The one that stutters, the one in the film, the King's Speech. He called for a National Day of Prayer, which they did do. I think in the First World War, prayer and fast. But this is a National Day of Prayer on the 23rd of May. I'll show you the little. So to see the news, you went to the pictures, and we're going to show you a little 30-second video that was on the news that day, really, in those days. In a minute, I'll show you the men on the beach at Dunkirk, and the people lining up to go into Westminster Abbey are actually in the same shape, snake shape.
Empire responds to the King's call. And at Westminster Abbey, heart of the Empire, the statesmen, the soldiers, the ambassadors, and hundreds of ordinary men and women join the mighty congregation. Her Majesty Queen Wilhelmina of the Netherlands arrives a few moments before their Majesties. No one here today could foresee the grave news that has come from Belgium. All the more, it is well for us to show the world that we still believe in divine guidance, in the laws of Christianity. May we find inspiration and faith from this solemn day.
So we get back to the slideshow, and so as it said there, it was a national day throughout the empire. Everybody went to, like, there used to be a lady go to the meeting in Yorkshire Rose, and it shows there that this said, I remember that. She said, it worked. People remembered it. You know, it really gripped the nation. They went along with it. Should be on now. Yeah, hang on. That's back. So this is a leaflet that the Germans dropped, and you can see Holland's gone. During the evacuation, Belgium surrendered. The beach at Dunkirk is about 6 miles long, and Belgium, the border of Belgium is about 2 miles further up. So they're closing in. There's 300,000 British there. The place is mad. So with the French, they had terrible communications, but brave men. That one of the generals didn't trust the telephone, so he'd send messengers down the road to tell someone what the story was. By the time the messenger got there, the story had changed. So when they went to bomb the Germans, for example, the Germans had gone because it took so long. The roads are full of refugees. So the British are trying to move towards the coast to get off, to leave, among a load of refugees. Every time something comes overhead, everybody has to go in the ditches. It's mad. It's just mad. On the 23rd of May, the same day as the National Day of Prayer, Adolf Hitler, who was only ever a corporal, by the way, in the war, he was never a great military strategist. He ordered them to stop. It's called the Halt Order. He told them to stop. Nobody knows to this day why. Some thought he wanted the Luftwaffe to finish them off, but the weather went bad and the Luftwaffe couldn't do it. Some people believed that like maybe they never had enough fuel, but they did. They just used the petrol on the roads. It's not like World War One. There's petrol stations now. He was superstitious. He used to read his stars, Hitler, and it's possible that, like in his stars, it said, you know, he just read them that way. But nobody knows. But for 2 days they stopped the advance, and the British and the French fortified the corridor to get people to Dunkirk, the only port left on the coast. The other fellow next to Hitler, his name is, well, whatever his name is, he's angry. The pocket would have been closed at the coast if only our armour had not been held back. The bad weather has grounded the Luftwaffe, and we must now stand and watch countless thousands of the enemy get away to England under our noses. So the planned game, Operation Dynamo, is get them off, and he believed they'd have 2 days before everything shut down, and he might get 40,000 men off. That's what they believed. If he could keep them away, keep them at bay for 2 days, 40,000 men. But because of the Halt Order, which only lasted 24, 48 hours, the strengthening meant that they could do it for 9 days, which made all the difference. There again is our little map. A couple of things from Sam. It says, I would hasten my escape from the windy storm and tempest. It's called blitzkrieg. lightning war. And they had better equipment, and they were just tearing through them. And destroy, O Lord, and divide their tongues, for I have seen violence and strife in the city. In Job it says, he disappoints the devices of the crafty, so that their hands cannot perform their enterprise. Dunkirk was a harbour, but the harbour was full of debris, so it couldn't be used as a harbour. It was on fire because they had an oil terminal there. So if you were travelling the roads looking to get to this port, in among all the chaos, if it was the daytime, you'd see a pillar of smoke, and if it was the night time, you'd see a pillar of fire. And if you can get there, you can get home. If you can get there, the same with the boats coming the other way, by the way, although they had to go a particular way not to be shot at, or not to be shot at easily anyway. So all the time it was on fire. And that made, as I say, if you looked up, it doesn't matter what was going on. You could see which way to go. And that actually helped them. So there was a call famously made for little ships. The Navy put out a call, anyone who's got a boat, I think a rowing boat was the biggest one, quite a big rowing boat, Mersey Ferry, the Medway Queen. A lot of them were river boats, they'd never been to sea. And the Navy, to work for the Navy, you have to be in the Navy. So the people that could manoeuvre the boats, they all got sworn in for 2 weeks and got 2 weeks' money. They all got sworn in, and I've got a quote in a minute from Douglas Bay that I'll keep that. That's the smallest one that went. So on the coast, the harbour is wrecked, so you can't get ships in. There's a thing called a mole. It's a breakwater, a long piece of, it's a stone thing to stop the waves crashing into the harbour, and you could get ships alongside that, and they decided to use that, though it's unnatural. But to the actual beach, you can't get a ship near the beach, but you can get little boats. So some of the little boats would take them home, some of them would take them to the big ships. Yeah. So this is Douglas Bader. He's quite well known for the RAF dam busters. I think he's one of those. Got his legs blown off. It says the sea from Dunkirk to Dover during these days of the evacuation looked like any coastal road in England and on a bank holiday. It was solid with shipping. So many. The weather. There's a remarkable thing with the weather. There was a big storm coming. These are little boats. These are river boats. They're not made for the sea. It's even though they're called little ships. It says that this is on the Met Office website. It says records show that the weather during the period of the Dunkirk operation was unusually calm. The storm, which was coming from the Atlantic, turned northwards up the west coast of Ireland and had much less impact than initially predicted on the seas at the Straits of Dover. This was a major turn of luck for the men waiting on the beaches. The maximum wind recorded throughout the evacuation was force 4, and on most days it varied between forces 1 and 3. The resulting calm sea conditions enabled even the smallest craft to cross the channel and saved many thousands of miles. In addition, the easterly wind direction, the amount of surf the ships and soldiers, it would have blown smoke from the shellfire and burning town towards the sea, providing a little cover from the aerial attack, although it wasn't all good. Yeah. Just a little quote from a book. It says, had the weather been bad, some would not have risked going. Neither their experience nor their craft would have been up to it. Some mariners have ever since been convinced that the uncharacteristic and miraculous calm which ruled the sea during most of the 10 days of Dunkirk missed the evacuation to proceed. The water was like a mill pond, was literally heaven sent because God had work for the British nation to do. There's lots of books on Dunkirk. That's one I read. If you've seen the film Dunkirk, Kenneth Branagh, he plays Admiral Ramsay, who was there on the mole all the way through. And he wrote to his wife this. He says, the situation is beyond belief, frightful, and one wonders how the British public will take it when the full implications are realised. It's all too horrible to contemplate. I am directing one of the most difficult and hazardous operations ever conceived, and unless the bon Dieu is very kind, there will be many tragedies attached to it. They were in trouble. They were in trouble. We only had one army, and it was over there. We only had one army. And if you to train another army up, who's going to train them? The army's over there. So, yeah, that's Ramsey. Yeah. So, as the men got onto the beaches, as I say, up from Dunkirk, there's lots of dunes. Dunkirk means the Church of the Dunes, and some of us have been there. Lots of us have been there. We used to do day trips there. It's a bit strange now. Dunkirk and Calais are a little bit strange. People jump into the boot of your car and all that. So I don't know. It's not very attractive. But this is the men on the beach. They get there and they'd wait in line 10 hours in the water. 10 hours in the water. And I did this presentation in Holland a few years ago, and there was a guy, a 90-year-old man, who was coming to meet, and don't think he ever did much. And he said, "Oh, I remember that." He said, in Holland, just up the coast, he said the crabs were really fat because the bodies in the water. They feed off the bodies. And he was saying that when Holland fell, they interred a lot of the men. And the people outside had little food, but the men inside had none. So he was a boy, and he'd throw food over the fence. He said, if they caught you, they absolutely battered you. They absolutely battered you. So, this is the fate of those who were not in a position to fight on. Just a shout out to the French. It says, so the French to the north and the British to the south held back the Germans. And it says, these Frenchmen under the gallant leadership of General Molyneux contained no less than 7 German divisions, which otherwise would have joined the assaults on the Dunkirk perimeter. This was a splendid contribution to the escape of their more fortunate comrades of the BEF. In the film Dunkirk, you see people getting off, and then if you find any French ones in the queue, you chuck them out. Well, of the 338,226, I think it's 30 to 60,000 were French. But they came off last. So in the early days, that might have happened. But in the last days, it was nearly all French. They came to England, and lots of them were very brave and went back. And 6 weeks later, France fell. So the film it might be true, but it's misleading in context that the French weren't taken off or not brave. It's simply not true. I put this in. I'll read this one out and tell you the other one. It says, Elliman, one of the soldiers, being spared, but some of his men were less fortunate. He described how his medley orderly had his right cheek blown away. 2 other men were killed. His telephonist was so shocked by the injuries that he saw, as Elliman put it, he went whackers and had to be carried away, laughing uncontrollably. And in the Dan Snow documentary, he talks about, so when they queued, some people ran away, by the way. Sometimes in the British units, they were told, every man for himself, just get away. And sometimes people weren't told that and still ran. And in all the queues at the beach, there was always an officer with a pistol. And if you jumped the queue, they'd shoot you. And that was needed. Not everyone was brave. Not everyone was brave, though most people were. And there's a story of one fella in the Dan Snow one, and he says this man had lost his legs, and he was looking for an officer in the queue so he could get his pistol and shoot himself. And he said he couldn't find one. He threw himself in the sea and died. And although you talk about the Lord of hosts and God delivering people, even on the winning side of war, there are terrible stories. Jaw is better than war. Jaw is better than war, despite the fact that there's a victory. You know what I mean? It doesn't help. It doesn't help the fellow that went whackers or the man who lost his life. I actually walked through the cemetery at Dunkirk, the war cemetery. 19 years old, and some of them, it's 19 son, 19 husband, 19 father. 60,000 people never came off, prisoners or killed. So it's although it's a great story, it's a terrible story. Just pictures of the men. The Royal Engineers that live in Gillingham, that belong in Gillingham, they built this. Put lorries into the water, weighed them down, put planks on them, and that made a little pier. That's what the Royal Engineers do. They're not really people that shoot people. They're people that demolish and build. They did that. I say the men could be in the water for 10 hours, waiting in the dunes. They had the Germans had Stuka bombers, and they would dive bomb. And if you'd ever watch a war film, they make a that's the Stuka. They don't actually make that noise naturally. They put a little thing on them so that when it went down, this thing made that terrible noise. It serves no purpose but to terrify. That's the only purpose it served. And it actually slowed the plane down. It's not good for the plane. And as I say, they show it in all the war films, but it was only to terrify. And these things are there all the time, doing what they can to detail you don't need, but they had a mole. As I say, the harbour's destroyed and not usable, but the mole, which is only to break water, they could get ships alongside and men in just getting them off. This is, if you ever been to Dunkirk, at low tide, the little boats come up again. They're still there. This is one called the Crested Eagle, and it was quite a disaster what happened to it. But it actually, when Belgium fell, it marked the edge of where you could go. Don't go north of that ship, because they're there. They're within shooting range of you. So it actually served a purpose even after it was shot to bits. Don't need that. Don't need that. Right, I like this one. This is from somebody remembering. They're nearly all gone now. It says, you knew this was the chance. This is someone getting off the beach. You knew this was the chance to get home, and you kept praying, please God, let us go, let us get out of this mess back to England. To see that ship that came to pick me and my brother up, it was the most fantastic sight. We saw dogfights up in the air, hoping nothing would happen to us. We saw one or two terrible sights. Then someone said, there's Dover. That was when we saw the white cliffs. The atmosphere was terrific. From hell to heaven was how the feeling was. We felt like a miracle had happened. And there's a bit more to it. There's lots more to it. But they felt when they got home that they wouldn't be received well. This is the greatest defeat in British military history. And they were very well received at home. They were very well received at home. People got it. People just got it. You know, it actually did something. Now these are the numbers. So they hoped they might get 40,000 men off in 2 days. They actually kept it going for 10 days, 9 days, 10 days. And these are the totals every day. Everyone counted, and everyone was counted. They know exactly everyone that got off. 338, that's 1/3 men off a beach under bombardment. It's absolutely incredible number, right? I'll show you all that equipment was gone. They couldn't bring any of the equipment. But he's also been through an ordeal, which if it didn't drive you mad, which it might, would make you the toughest soldier going. Right? Yeah. So on the last day, that's talking about going back purely for the French, but there was other French taken off on the late days as well. And there was on the last day, so the Admiral, Ramsey, and a couple of others went out, they had a little speedboat, and he went up and down the coast shouting out, is anybody left? In French and in English, is anybody left? And when he got no answer, they left. There were people fighting that couldn't get to the beach, and they had to, whatever their fate was their fate. Right? But on the beaches, nobody was left. Nobody, not one. No one answered, and that's when they stopped. Operation Dynamo was complete. So this is as it finishes, 4th of June 1940. About the 8th or 9th of June now, isn't it? It says Churchill made this speech to Parliament. It's a very, very famous speech. The speeches were great. He says, I have myself full confidence that if all do their duty, if nothing is neglected and the best arrangements are made, as they are being made, we shall prove ourselves once again able to defend our island home, to ride out the storm of war, to outlive the menace of tyranny, if necessary for years, if necessary, alone. And he knew that France was going to fall. And that would leave Britain on its own, with an army with no equipment, because it had all been left, and a very, very strong enemy. A very strong enemy. And he carries on. We know this part. Everyone knows this part. We shall go on to the end. We shall fight in France. We shall fight on the seas and oceans. We shall fight with growing confidence and growing strength in the air. We shall defend our island, whatever the cost may be. We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds. We shall fight in the fields and in the streets, and we shall fight in the hills. And this is the bit that often doesn't get quoted. We shall never surrender. And even if, which I do not for a moment believe, this island or a large part of it was subjugated and starving, then our empire beyond the seas, armed and guarded by the British fleet, would carry on the struggle until in God's good time, the new world, with all its power and might, steps forth to the rescue and liberation of the old, which is exactly what happened. I think it's about, I can't remember what month in 1941, the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. And that night, Churchill said, that night, I slept the sleep of the saved and the thankful, because the war was won. Germany was defeated, Japan was defeated, and the war was won because the Japanese kicked America into the war. He knew that the new world was needed. And they're connected. Britain and America are connected. Connected in Genesis, and they're connected. I'm not sure which speech it's in. It's a quote from Napoleon. So when Napoleon was looking to invade England, because now Dunkirk's over, Operation Dynamo's over, the next thing straight away is the Battle of Britain. If you go to Dover, there's a RAF museum, which is quite nice, but down below you've got an exhibition on what happened in the Battle of Britain, the one that was in the skies. Very, very good. Right? And they lost that one, the Germans. And then came the Blitz. Which is in a whole other story. But Hitler's looking to invade. That's what he wants. And when Napoleon was looking to invade with 200,000 men, Chatham and all that, that's what Fort Amherst is for. Somebody said to him, there are bitter weeds in England. And Churchill said, there are many more now. The British Expeditionary Force are home. And he knew he was listening. Yeah. People signed up and bought into it. If that had been different, this would be different. Our lives would be totally different. People wouldn't be allowed to be together. Hitler was a master race man. Hated Christianity, hated it. Hated certain races. Would make slaves out of people that he thought were less. Absolute slaves. Would gas people that were different, that weren't well. He would gas them. That's what they did. This world would be a different place if that had been different. It's called the hinge of fate, or you can call it the hinge of fate. The Germans liked it. To them, they went, and this was a great victory, and the postcards, loads of postcards and pictures. On TripAdvisor, they give it 5 stars. You know, this is the best place to be, because it's the exact opposite. And has anyone seen the film Dunkirk? And there's a Spitfire flying over and it runs out of puff. The man flying now owns Everton Football Club. Dan Friedkin, he actually flies that in the film. He wasn't at Dunkirk. All this stuff, everything, all the vehicles, they would wreck them so they couldn't be used, but everything is gone. So for a year we had next to nothing. Then after a year, everything that we had was new, and the men were tougher. So, I say it lasted 9 days, 338. So they called for a National Day of Thanksgiving, like the National Day of Prayer. And in every church in England, they sang a particular psalm. And it's this one. It says it was sang, so I don't know how it goes. If it had not been for the Lord who was on our side, now may Israel say. If it had not been for the Lord who was on our side when men rose up against us, then had they swallowed us up quick, when their wrath was kindled against us. Then the waters had overwhelmed us, the streams had gone over our soul. Then the proud waters had gone over our soul. Blessed be the Lord who has not given us as a prey to their teeth. Our soul is escaped as a bird out of the snare of the fowlers. The snare is broken and we are escaped. Our help is in the name of the Lord who made heaven and earth. And the top there it says, the godly bless for a miraculous deliverance. Churchill said, he said, we mustn't give this the attributes of a victory. He said, wars are not won by evacuations. And then he's the one that said, this is the worst defeat in British military. He said, but it is a deliverance. He said, it is a deliverance. And deliverance is the miracle. I like that. This is a 5-minute speech which is worth looking up on the internet when he goes to Harrow School, where he went to school. And just one little thing to transfer in between Second World War and Medway Revival Fellowship. I was watching the Dan Snow one. There was this one guy, he never ran away. He saw terrible things and he got off. And he said, why didn't you run? And he said, I just had to do my bit. I had to do my bit. And the things are overcome by people doing their bit. No more. No more. Somebody might get a VC, but most people didn't get much at all. But we can do our bit. And this is to Harrow School. It's a good little speech, 5 minutes. It says, do not let us speak of darker days. It's from us. He wanted the words changed to it. Let us rather speak of sterner days. These are not dark days. These are great days, the greatest days that our country has ever lived. And we must all thank God that we've been allowed, each of us according to our stations, to play a part in making these days memorable in the history of our race. Famous painting. Yeah. So I've got the picture on. He went to Canada and he gave a speech there, and it says, when I warned the French government that Britain would fight on alone, whatever they did, they surrendered in July. The generals told the Prime Minister and his divided cabinet, in 3 weeks England will have her neck wrung like a chicken, some neck. This is the last picture. Two more little things. One of them, so up to May 1940, when nothing happened, there was a massive amount of pressure to make peace with Germany. Let them have what they wanted. Let them have it, and just leave us alone, which they would have took certain parts of the empire, like India, away. They would have scuttled the fleet. And there's a lot of pressure on Churchill to talk. And he had a war cabinet of 5 men, and he had to vote, do we make peace or not? And he voted 3-2 for war. And the 3 that voted for war had all been to war. One of them was Attlee, who became the Prime Minister afterwards. Now, Attlee, in his room in the Commons, called himself Major Attlee. He was always, because people knew that if you don't fight, even though war's terrible, they knew what the alternative was. It's not that people want war. It's not like that at all. If you read about Nelson, he never liked war. But you knew what you'd have to do when you'd have to do it. And but I always thought that's interesting. The 3 that voted for war had experience, and the 2 that didn't. 3-2 is how they voted. This is the surrender. So it's interesting. I have a little theory that D-Day in 1944 is the 6th of June, but it was postponed for 24, 48 hours. And if it hadn't been, it would have been on the day that Dunkirk finished, the anniversary of it. And I don't know that was on purpose, but I don't know. And this is the surrender in 1945 to a man called Field Marshal Montgomery, right, who was taken off the beach at Dunkirk. He was evacuated, and he survived to take the surrender of the Germans. So that's it. It's all done. Hallelujah. John Major, would you just pray for us? Thank the Lord for us. Praise you, Lord. Hallelujah.